So I'm going to quickly go over a few different things in SketchUp to sort of help you out with the modeling task. So first off, we need to actually go to SketchUp. Whatever, it's fine. Doesn't really matter which link I click on because I can always go to the right place from the actual website itself. So we'll go here, and then we'll tell it to do start modeling. Oh, I forgot that I'm on an old version of browser. Let's try again, this time on Chrome. All right, there we go. So here is the environment. There's a couple things that we'll want to get used to. So first off, let's just go over some of the hotkeys. So getting used to these will really help you with like your movement and stuff. So the main ones are the spacebar, the orbit, and rotate. Right, those are going to be one of the main ones that we really get used to. All right, so spacebar is what allows us to select things. Move, M lets us move things, okay? Q lets us orbit things, all right? So now this is based on different axes. Now this guy here, he's actually 2D, he's not really 3D. He's just a graphic on a flat surface, right? He doesn't really have 3 dimensions. When we import some other stuff, that will be more useful, and we can talk more about that. Now, other tools that are important. Let's see, what else do we have in here? All right, and then orbit is also useful. Did we see orbit? Yeah, so O is orbit. That was on the other one. So then zooming, we can do that with our mouse wheel. If we go here in this little orbit tool and we click the hand, this is panning, and that can be very useful as well. So it would be nice if we had a hotkey for that. So the next thing is to be able to actually import the different robot pieces, right? So if we do SketchUp, NXT, parts, something like that, should give us what we're looking for. So we want this 3D warehouse link. So from here we can see different parts. Obviously the most important is this large one here. And we probably want some beams. You might want some gears. Wheels would have been really useful last semester if we were doing this last semester, but for this one, it's not so important. I don't really care about these connector pieces, right? So when you're building them, obviously you're going to have to use axles and connectors and probably bushings, and you might use some of these other ones. I'm not really too worried about them for the most part because they're sort of, they go inside of the different parts, right? So you don't really see them very much, and trying to get them to go directly inside, like, and line up perfectly is a little tricky. So I'm not really too worried about that. So just sort of the bigger pieces, like the beams, you might need the angled beams and the motors and stuff. Those are more what I'm looking for. So I've downloaded a bunch of them. We can see them down here, right? So in SketchUp, I can go up here to the folder, and I can click Insert, and then I can tell it from my computer. And this will let me go and find the different files that I just downloaded. By default, they should be in my Downloads folder. So I did download them the other day because I was kind of messing with things, so you can see that here, right? So here's that one that has the brick and the motors and the sensors. So I can say Open, Insert as a component. It's going to attach it to my mouse. So right now you can see it's moving around, right? So I can click where I want to sort of anchor it into that spot, right? And now what I can do is I can sort of focus on this area. Now that I know how large the different parts sort of are, that can help me kind of decide what I want my view to look like. So now that I have this here, I can start to interact with these. Right now, these are all grouped together, right? So to be able to move any one of these individually, I have to basically click into that group, right? And then I can move them individually, right? So, and that's kind of a pain, but it is what it is. So when I'm moving these, I use the pointer, I press spacebar for that hotkey, right? And then once it's selected, I can press M for move, and then I can choose each one individually, right? So when I'm moving them, I'm clicking them once with the move tool just to kind of get into move mode. I'm not holding down right now, I'm just moving the mouse around. Then I can click again to confirm that that's where I want it, right? I can press spacebar to click a different one, M for move, click on it, put it where I want, click to confirm, right? And then I can keep kind of doing that. Now, when I'm doing this, notice how this box is expanding. That is sort of the containing group for all of these things, right? So now I don't have to leave them in the group. Like if I'm like not very thrilled about having to double click inside, I can right click and I can tell it to explode, and that makes the components now individual and no longer part of that group. So I've ungrouped them, right? So that's good. So now I can kind of move these around, right? So this might be the main part of my robot, right? A lot of these other things I probably don't need. So, oops. So let's move all of these kind of out of the way. So I'm just selecting each one and then jumping to the move tool, move all of the way, and I'm using the hotkeys to make it a whole lot faster. So now I'm probably need quite a few motors, right? So first off, let's move this motor a little bit closer, right? Now, what is this motor? How's it going to be positioned in comparison? It might be on top. So moving is a little tricky. The way I had it before, it was very easy to move like on the, I guess, the X and the Z, but not on the Y, right? Moving on the Y can be a little tricky, right? So as I'm moving around, you can see sort of how that dotted line looks, right? So when I'm moving, if I'm on an axis that I want to remain on, I can hold Shift. Oh, let's try again. All right. If I'm moving and, oh, right, I'm pressing the wrong button. Holding Shift, that like locks it on that axis, right? So now I can't, well, I can, but I have to really try to get it off, right? So that can help. So if I'm trying to move it up, and I can get it on the blue axis, which is Y, then I can hold Shift, right? And I can move it on that one. It's typically easier to move it on like one axis at a time. There we go. Don't try to like move it like on X, Y, and Z all at once. That's going to be more difficult. Instead, just focus on like one axis at a time. Okay. Axis, axi. All right. So deciding exactly where this is going to be. You know what? I think actually I want to rotate it because I think maybe I'll start standing up and then I'll have some other ones off. All right, so Q, right? So right now when I press Q, right, it will rotate, right? But to understand how it's rotating, right, this little circle, it's kind of jumping around, right? So what it's doing is it's trying to figure out which axis I want to rotate on. So I can try to get it on the plane that I want to like sort of rotate around. So if I want to rotate on sort of this way, right, then I want it to rotate parallel to this plane up top. So I'm going to try to get it to sit on there. And then once I have it kind of anchored there, I can click again and I can rotate the way that I want. If you're rotating way up close to the sort of the center point where the axis is kind of in the middle of it, it's going to be a lot harder to get exactly where you want. Pull your mouse out, and then you can move much smoother, much more easily. Right, so not quite. So kind of like that-ish, right? It's a little off. Okay. Move it that way first. Let's orbit around. Zoom out a little bit. Now we can try moving it down on the blue axis, right? So something like that. Now that I have this one more or less where I want, I can copy and paste, right? And so now I have another one, and I can figure out kind of where I want it to be, right? Maybe this one is intended more to be like this, right? So once you get the hang of it, then you can start to really work with it and manipulate it until you kind of understand the basics and get used to the way the controls work. It's going to be awfully difficult. Now, I did say that you're going to need some other parts too, right? So you're probably going to need also, oops, not open, but insert. You're probably going to need the beams as well, because I might want to use beams to help extend out how far the arm can go, right? So beams are going to be the same thing. It's going to start with it sort of attached to my mouse, right? And then I can right-click, and I can tell them to explode. And then I can select these individually to move them where I want them to be, right? To kind of give it that idea of like this part attached to there and extending out. So that's more or less the basics. It will take you time to get used to it and to really be able to manipulate it, and that's okay, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you're trying to get the idea of what you're going to be building.